Okay, we appear to be set. So, welcome to Three Peas in a Pod, second podcast here at Magic Logland Studios in Wigan. I'm very pleased to say we have a distinguished group of guests this afternoon to talk about a subject very, very dear to my heart. One of whom includes Mr. Richard Blair, of course, the wonderful gentleman who is the son of George Orwell, who this conversation is mostly about. I'm Alan Gregory and wrote a musical, thanks to Richard's largesse, um, in 2018, based on his father's seminal work, The Road to Wigan Pier. Um, Completely fabricated a love story between George and one of the ladies of Wigan. Um, and most of you were either in it or there in these distinguished company I've got this morning. Sorry, this afternoon. So, if I could ask you just to introduce yourselves first of all, and who you sort of represent in the town. If we could start with uh, ladies first, I think. If we start and then go clockwise around the room. So, off you go, Maxine.
Okay, so I'm Maxine Mealy. I'm the assistant principal at Wigan and Lee College, covering all six campuses, but my background is in the arts, specifically performing arts. And obviously, we've been a big part of the cultural journey with you, Alan, who's not only been in to play piano for our ballet students, but also to engage with our students on a wide range of ventures.
Next.
My name's Gary Speakman. I was thinking about sort of what was relevant for the discussions today. There's quite a lot, really, so I hope I don't go on a bit too long. But yeah, and I guess it's probably partly a function of being that bit older that I feel like I've been around for some time. So yeah, for most of my 60 years plus, I've lived in Wigan. I've got, I think, a real sense of sort of heritage and pride around sort of where I came from. So generations of coal miners on both sides of my family, which is, I think, relevant to sort of certainly part of the discussion today. I guess I can split my contribution probably into two main elements. One is business. So for about the last 15 years of my career, which continues, I've been in the travel, holidays, leisure market, which I think is sort of pertinent. And as I've moved more into semi-retirement, then I've sort of increased my involvement in a number of organisations based in Wigan, which have at the heart of them young people. So I'm currently chair of Wigan Youth Zone. I'm also chair of the Deanery High School and Sixth Form, which is just next door here to where we are today. I've been chair of a cricket club for 21 years. I sit on the Wigan Enterprise Board with Dave. And I also have a oversight board relationship with Arts at the Mill, which is better known as the Old Courts, which is an Arts Council NPO, National Portfolio Organisation. So I've got a passion actually about arts and culture and music,
Wonderful, yeah.
but it sort of, I guess, I don't necessarily represent those organisations I've just mentioned, but I can certainly reflect their views and sort of interest in all things Wigan.
Over to you, Richard.
Yes, my name is Richard Blair. I'm the adopted son of George Orwell. I'm also the patron of the Orwell Society. And it was some years ago that we, as a society, got involved with Wigan because there was always this perception for many, many years, decades almost, that there was a certain antipathy to what my father had written about the road to Wigan Pier. And I think we established a very deep rapport with a lot of people in Wigan, and we've had a lot of positive feedback from them. We as a society have been here several times and thoroughly enjoyed their hospitality. We've established a connection with the local school and also with the local youth theatre, and it's the Sunshine House as well. And I would like to think that we're trying to not force my father on Wigan, but to try and explain some of the arguments against him that have been put out by all sorts of people, which you're free to do, in that we are Orwell was trying to help Wigan in many ways by telling people, the rest of the country, the rest of the world perhaps, what conditions were like up in this part of the world during the Depression. And it was pretty grim. And I think a lot of people might have said he may have over-egged the omelette a bit, but nevertheless, he got under the skin, I think, of many of the people of Wigan, which is why he refused to go and stay in nice, warm council houses, of which they were being built at the time. He wanted to see what it was like to be at the coal. We went to the coalface as well, but what it was like to stay in houses that was, well, let's be honest, they were slums. They were occupied by people who were very proud, but nevertheless, the slums were owned by the coal mine owners and the factory owners, and they were not very good. I mean, there were slums all over the world, of course, also throughout the UK. But that's why he went, so that's why people criticise him, I think. Why did he go to the tripe shop? I think that was probably one of the things that people recognised and tend to home in on. Apart from the fact the description of the tripe shop actually is very funny, but that's by the by. So I think what we're trying to do as a society, Orwell Society, we want to continue our relationship with Wigan and hopefully build on it. And Alan is also doing things with his music to bolster that along. And it really is producing some very, very good stuff. And I'm looking forward very much to seeing the final product.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent. David.
Yeah, so David Baxter, the founder and CEO of Wigan and Lee Community Charity. So we oversee the social enterprise, social economy sector in the borough. We reckon we've got about 250-ish social enterprises, trading charities, and that's growing every year. We also led the Kite Mark in 2019 to get Wigan registered as a social enterprise town, of which Wigan is one of 37 in the whole country. And pretty much like we were saying before, you know, my story's been around the fact that I too am a son of a coal miner. My dad was a survivor of the Goulburn disaster in 1979. And when I was at primary school, I remember it like it was yesterday that I wanted to be a coal miner. That's what I saw. That's what I saw when I opened my curtains. That line of sight, as you and I have called it many times, Alan, was coal mines, and that's what I wanted to do. And that industry was taken away from me, obviously. So I've been privileged to spend my only working career in my neighbourhood in Plattbridge. So for me, that line of sight, which is Plattbridge Community Zone, is what's inspired me to stay and work locally. So a big part of our aim is to make sure that we create that line of sight of community buildings like Sunshine House that you mentioned before, Richard, here, you know, places like Fairclempt, etc. And how can people locally know that they can stay and work in the Wigan Borough and actually turn that passion into their own social enterprise? So yeah, it's a big passion of ours to keep people in the Wigan Borough.
Okay, thanks very much for that. I appreciate everything you've said, and I want to draw some of those introductions together, really. Clearly, Gary is working with a lot of young people, so is Maxine in education. Clearly, there's a lot of performing arts involved here. But part of this is the involvement of the community and the voluntary sector within this to get local people who probably wouldn't get engaged in this normally into something which will be for the benefit of the whole town. Now, one of the things that you said, Richard, of course, was that your father was trying to help Wigan in his way by showing how much it was a deprived area and that they needed additional support from the government, etc. Clearly, some of that still applies, but Wigan, of course, is undergoing a major development that we all know. The town centre is changing dramatically. There are more and more things in the offing for opening with regard to culture, the whole reconstruction of Hay Hall, etc. And this show, this Road to Wigan Pier musical, was always designed to be a community activity. It was written by Wiganers for not just Wiganers, but obviously for Wiganers about their own heritage. And it's to try and show the world, not that we need help and everything else, but actually that we've got quite a lot of culture up here. So don't dismiss us for the very fact that we are in the north and we are based in Wigan. So it's almost turning the whole thing on its head, saying, look, this is a musical, possibly the festival, which we'll talk about later, which is showing Wigan in a different light, just as Orwell's book was doing in 1936-37, but for slightly different reasons. So one of the questions that I posed to you in the brief for this podcast was your understanding of the current cultural scene in Wigan. And really what I meant was, from an outsider's perspective, what would someone living out of Wigan think to come to Wigan for with regard to culture? And do we actually promote that enough? And is this show or festival a way of doing that? So, quite a long question there, but, think of yourselves as not being a Wiganer. How would you think the culture of Wigan exists? What is it? What would attract you to the town? Gary, let's have you giving your first view on that.
Well, thank you, Alan. Yeah, I was hoping it might start somewhere else. Yeah, well, the perspective externally may well be different from that internally. I'm going to start answering the question from an internal perspective, and I'll explain why. I do think that sort of culture, art, music, the sort of whole sort of combination, I think is getting stronger, and I think there's it's not quite a rich tapestry, but there is certainly the sort of the feel of a tapestry of lots of interesting and stimulating activities. I think it would be right to say that the promotion of all of that, and therefore the awareness of all of that externally looking into Wigan, is probably not where anyone would yet want it to be. But I guess you've got to start somewhere, and I think the good news is that we do have an increasing amount of content and things to shout about, and that doesn't mean that there aren't lots of other things that can be done. But at least we've got something to work with. So I do think the external perspective probably is not where we'd want it to be, but it can and should get better.
Okay, just let me pick you up on that point just a little bit before I bring someone else into the conversation. What is there internally that you see as being something? What specifically are we talking about?
Well, I think the last couple of years you've seen quite a developing music scene. So I mean there are a number of now well known bands. Obviously the Lathams are probably the sort of shining example of that. But they represent a pretty, I think, strong cross section of improvement, I think, in opportunities both for young people to play music in live venues and then for them to develop that. So I think externally that would be quite visible. I think if culture includes sport, then I think we've got a very strong sporting heritage across the borough. Rugby league is a strong anchor to that. You can have a debate about how internationally recognisable that is, for a world audience, but certainly, in some of the key countries like Australia, New Zealand, France, England, it would be very well sort of connected to Wigan, and for that matter, Lee. Lee won the Challenge Cup, didn't they, last year? So yeah, I think sport, Wigan Athletic. It is only just over 10 years ago that Wigan Athletic won the FA Cup. So again, I think there are things there that would resonate, and I guess over the last, it's not quite 100 years, 90 years or so, we've got the literature that we've referred to already in terms of Richard's father, which would still resonate now with people, if only through the title of the book. So I think Wigan does have a number of sort of points of contact, points of relevance to an external audience.
Okay, Maxine, as someone who's very much involved in the performing arts side of higher education in Wigan, and from a personal perspective as a performer yourself, what do you see as the highlights of Wigan's current cultural scene? Admittedly, bear in mind that the Lathams and the other groups have made some sort of impact on that. So what's your perception?
So I suppose I represent some of the leaders that came into Wigan who were not from Wigan. I knew the reputation of the college of old. I knew the technical college. I started to get wind of the council and the way the council was starting to invest and support the arts. I knew how well the rugby scene was. I was very aware of that. But what I probably wasn't as aware of, and I knew of Wigan Pier, because we all of a certain age know of Wigan Pier. Yeah. But actually, what struck me when I did my research and decided, is this a town that I wanted to come to work, was actually the ambition. There's a real hunger, a real political hunger in our young people. So not only is there a real wealth of talent, and I think post-COVID, their ability to apply digitally, I think people would be really surprised by the level. We've got students on TV, we've got them in film, we've got them, we're not the only organisation, of course, but the standard of the training that they're getting only goes so far. You've got to have the support of the local community. The councillors are incredibly supportive. The MPs, of course, we've got Lisa and Andy now, and they invest and come in and meet the students. They raise those aspirations. And I think the other side of that is, so I think we're getting recognised, because the community, I mean, we sit on this sort of cultural committee, and I think there's such a buy-in. There's a buy-in at every level, and that's why it's working, and that's why people like myself are wanting to work here. And interestingly, our students that are going off to university, they want to bring it back, and that comes down to exactly what you were saying before. People are very proud of where they come from. Now, if we link that all back to Learn a Voice, I think it's interesting, isn't it? Your dad and that sort of message and recognising what the North's like and changing the narrative of what it's about. They want to change the narrative. They want to see the economy grow. And I think actually they're picking up a book that you would never have assumed they would pick up. Not only are they picking it up, but they're really, really wanting to sort of have a voice, so much so that some of them are even campaigning to vote from 16. I think it's a very political time, and I think young people have never ever been more vocal than they are at the moment, and they express that. And the reason we're so passionate about the art is art is the shop window, isn't it? If the standard of art is of incredibly high standard, that says a lot about the town. And if I think about the production, if I go back to your production, I'll be the first to say I was blown away. I couldn't believe who was involved. I couldn't believe the script. I couldn't believe the score. I couldn't believe the talent. And you know what? Sometimes what you see is what you get, and it was exceptional. So absolutely, we're 100% bought in for a various number of reasons, really.
Okay, that's very nice of you to say. So, Richard, as a true sort of outsider, really, but although you are, of course, a Wiganer by adoption, but you live in beautiful,
very nice of you to say so.
It is, well, you live in beautiful Warwickshire, of course, and you spend most of your time there. I mean, had you not met us, what would the concept, do you think, of culture in Wigan have been to a typical, I don't know, counties dweller in England prior to you having any involvement with it?
Yes, I guess, Alan, for the ordinary man in the street, for the want of a better word, that Wigan is, for a lot of people, people know the word Wigan because for all sorts of reasons, because they don't like sport, so Wigan and rugby league is synonymous with each other. But I think one of the things is that I've noticed this, and I've just thought about it, I've just come back from Scotland, where I did a couple of appearances in a book festival in small communities, and I wonder whether Wigan would benefit from a festival of some sort, festival of literature,
Absolutely.
music. I'm sure it could put on something really quite substantive. Because look, we've got Cheltenham. Crikey, why can't Wigan be as good as Cheltenham? There's no reason why it shouldn't be. It's got the talent. I'm sure it has the talent, from what I've seen on my visits here. So it would be, as from my point of view, I would like to see something like that. But of course, I'm only that's only one suggestion. So I would maybe you might think, well, oh God, everybody else is doing a book festival. Perhaps we have to think of something else. Well, okay, you'll have to put your heads together and see what you come up with. But that was the first thing that came into my mind, because I was down in a little village called Polperro down in Cornwall, where they've got a festival. The local school is putting on, the local people are putting on a festival of arts, and Wigan is a big, it's a city, is it not?
No, it's a
town.
Is it? Or it's a large
town.
town.
It has aspiration.
It's a big town.
Big town. Yeah, big town.
It's
I'm
one of
sure
the
it.
biggest-
I'm sure it has lots of talent somewhere in there that if you could just winkle it out and give it encouragement, it could come up with something
Platform.
really quite, especially if it was majored on the local area, or on the northwest. Because there must be a lot of talent in it. I mean, there's the entertainment, of course, of this part of the world has always been there. Every town had a some sort of entertainment, maypoles or dancing or especially songs, folk songs.
Yes.
Now I've heard some of them are absolutely wonderful. So that's my thought.
Okay, David, you clearly represent the voluntary sector, who tends to get involved more with the have-nots, shall we say, rather than the haves. I mean, in your perspective of people living in the borough in that economic deprived situation, what's their view of culture, do you think?
I mean, I suppose if you take it down to neighbourhood level, most people will associate culture with, obviously Gary mentioned before about sport, because obviously pretty much we've always said before that every neighbourhood's got a connection to sport through rugby, football. I know I did a podcast here only a few weeks ago with Phil Clark and Ince Rosebery Rugby Club and Wigan Cosmos, because they are in the heart of the community, and most people probably know that if they want to be on television at night time, Sky Sports for example, that there is a clear pathway there from neighbourhoods right through to St Pat's, right through to Wigan Warriors. Lesser so obviously with music and other forms of culture. I think it's interesting in our sector in the last 10 years, as we said before, about 250 social enterprises. You could argue a good 10-20% of those are culture based. I'm thinking off the top of my head, obviously things like the Old Courts. You've got groups like More Than Words, groups who are specifically kind of showcasing at some of those opportunities that are out there in a wider world, especially with people facing barriers, disabilities. We now have the ability to start to showcase them in our neighbourhoods. But I think, I mean, it's as I was saying before, most of our neighbourhoods, obviously, kind of, we still don't, you and I have talked many times about the fact that places like Platt Bridge, for example, even in Wigan Town Centre, go back 20, 30, 40 years ago. Most of our parents met at the local pool halls and pallies, and we mentioned before, I don't think we mentioned about the history of Wigan Casino and the Northern Soul scene, and people, I know my mum and dad, as we've met, and we've done a lot of talks before about it, they met in neighbourhoods at these kind of pallies and labour clubs, and most of them have disappeared now, hence the work that you and I were doing, Alan, in trying to safeguard Bickershire Village Club, which is the only one left in the Abram Ward area, which we obviously achieved a few years ago. So it is a shame that a lot of these places where our parents met and grandparents met are no longer kind of there, and so there is a need to go into the town centres, and that's not always the case. And so obviously this day and age, it's easier for us to travel to Manchester or Liverpool. So, but that's not exactly what we want. I just always feel for me that, like I said, when I look at our sector, that the opportunities now are kind of there to start to get more opportunities for local people to set these enterprises up. I look around our borough, we've got so many open spaces. I mean, you know, I know we've had many conversations about Bickershire Festival back in '72, and I know you are modern day Jeremy Beadle, Harlan, because it was Jeremy Beadle who, you know, God bless him, you know, God rest his soul. He's only created the Bickershire Festival, and I look at you as the modern day Jeremy Beadle.
Thanks very much, David.
There you go. Yeah,
He has a look.
yeah, you got that look. But as we say, these are festivals that we still talk about to this kind of day. But as Richard said, they need to be there again. And I know the hype early on this year and the music festivals in Robin Park really were just phenomenal. I mean, I didn't get a chance to go to them, but they were phenomenal, and we need to clearly start to build on that a lot more. So for me, that's the starting point that we've showcased,
though, isn't it?
Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, sorry, Maxine, I apologise.
Sorry, apologies for jumping in, but I just want to jump on the back of that. It's all about exposure. You know, the tickets to get to a theatre, the tickets to go and see a band, the tickets to go and see a pantomime, for example. You know, it's really expensive, and for some of the families, they've just not had that exposure. And I think if you look, for example, this Christmas, besides what we do on Christmas Eve, which is going around and distributing hundreds of Christmas dinners and toys, actually we're putting pantos on for the local children, for the local community, because we know they couldn't afford to go and hop on a train and go into Manchester and pay 30. I mean, the theatres aren't exactly overcharging, they're not making a huge profit, but the reality is they've got to charge what they charge, and for a family of four you're talking over £100. So it's out of their reach, which I think is another driver of why we do what we do here in Wigan, because the more we can give them access to the arts, the art, you know, you're touching now onto the mental health agendas, you know, that feel good factor. These are far reaching agendas. It isn't as simple as affordability, but that's a key part of it. And so, you know, I think this all links up for that very reason.
Yeah, I think the common link, we talked about it just before we started the podcast, is this sort of revisiting of the George Orwell sort of principle of, we call it levelling up now, but that inequality sort of focus really that George Orwell brought through The Road to Wigan Pier is a very relevant and contemporary narrative. And I think in all the things that we've just been touching on there, that lack of opportunity for all is something that certainly, obviously Richard doesn't live in the town, but the three of us are sort of involved in different ways in trying to improve that. And I think access to cultural activity, recognising the financial challenges for a lot of our families in Wigan Borough is really important. And I think that's what Beyond Wigan Pier did. It found a way of sort of showcasing some of Wigan's talent, a wide cross section of talent, but in a way that allowed nearly 1,000 people to get into an auditorium. And I think that's what we're trying to get more of.
Well,
that's exactly, yeah. Sorry, that's exactly what we're trying to get more of. Yes. Richard, please.
Can I bounce in here? Gary, I quite agree. I would take that statement even further, in the sense that, if I may say so, you could use the Road to Wigan Pier as some sort of not mantra, but a title for Wigan to use to draw in a lot of the other outlying villages, towns, into some sort of festival that is centred around the world of the Road to Wigan Pier. I mean,
yeah.
use it as a real positive, as opposed to where a lot of people thought the Road to Wigan Pier was a bit negative. And I think some people actually need to be not educated, persuaded that in fact it was not quite as they think it is, but nevertheless, I'm sure it could be turned into a real positive, and you could have a really cracking festival. I think if you like the Cheltenham Festival springs to mind.
But that is precisely where we're going with this. The vehicle for it is obviously a musical that has been produced, been shown to be successful, not produced in its entirety. But the whole essence of it was that the community would be involved in producing something which would then carry on. Because far too often we have great ideas and we put lovely workshops and stuff on, and they go nowhere. What this was intended to do was exactly what you just said. And Gary and I and all of us have had this conversation over the last few years, that you could make something really special in Wigan because of its geographical proximity to the rest of the world, easy access to it, because of the connections with Orwell, which are worldwide. The road to Wigan, the road to Wigan Pier actually is the new road to a new Wigan, because everything will be different in 2027, fingers crossed. The whole town will have changed. And what we want to show the world is that the whole town has changed. And from a political perspective, there is no better time to launch something like this than 2027, which is when the other dates will be. Clearly, what I have in mind, I've always said this, is almost an Oberammergau type thing. Oberammergau, of course, the town in Germany who produces the Life of Christ every 10 years, and millions of people flock there. The whole town is involved. Everybody gets part of, does everything. They plan it from one decade to the next. Similarly, I suppose, like the old Preston Guild, which I'm not even sure if it's still on. That was once every 10 years. Massive festival. I'm thinking more once every 2 years. This show is the vehicle for it. It's not the be-all and end-all. There will be a new show. There'll be a book festival involved in it. The Lathams can come and have the concert at the same time. One of the things we've all said, and Maxine said it earlier, is we've got loads of talent in this town, but they seem to have to go elsewhere to perform it. They perform it on theatres outside of the town. They perform it in plays and films outside of the town. The festival, yes, we had loads of stuff here, but most of the money, I suspect, went to outside the town, not to inside the town. And what we're trying to do with this whole concept is to bring it close together and to bring that involvement of everyone so that they understand the myriad of things that the arts can bring. It isn't just about, and the festival in particular, it isn't just about the performers, it's also about all the industries that go around it, the painters, the decorators, the electricians, the hotels, the restaurant. Everything has a knock-on effect if you can attract that number of people to it. Wigan is in a unique place. Thanks to Richard's involvement, we have possibly one of the greatest writers of the 20th century's only living relative who is here supporting what we're trying to do, which is a phenomenal plus from our perspective. I mean, one of the questions I asked on the brief was, is culture better now than it was in 1936 when Orwell was here? And one or two answers we've had in the conversation before this, but I remember my grandfather saying he went to see Isabel Bailey at the Queen's Hall, and he went to see Paderewski, the Polish pianist, at the Queen's Hall. Now, Isabel Bailey was the biggest opera singer in the world at the time. Paderewski was not only the Prime Minister of Poland, he was also a great composer. And my grandfather had no money. So first of all, it must have been cheap. And there were the venues to go. There were 3 theatres, there were 5 cinemas, there were 4 dance halls in Wigan. All of that has now gone. Now, clearly that's because technology has moved on and people discovered bingo and all sorts of other things, that the television, etc. But that sense of community disappeared as a result. As Gary quite rightly says, probably none of us would have been here had the Court Dance Hall not been present, because most of our grandparents met each other there. Otherwise, we wouldn't have been here. So I think what I'm trying to do with this festival is to launch the showcase within the town at a historical, well-known site that we all know to try and change people's perception of Wigan, but to also create this wealth in Wigan, which I can't see anything else currently, apart from, of course, the Warriors and the Latics maybe, which is actually attracting people here. I think a festival of this nature would attract people here because of its uniqueness to the town. Any comments on any of that?
Yes, Maxine.
I was just going to say, I keep coming in as an outsider actually, and I think there's a lot more that attracts people to the town. I would definitely say that, and I would say, you know, we've got theatre at the college, we've got we've got the old courts. I mean, I discovered a band. I know they sing Chippy Tea because the students told me from the minute I arrived, and I've seen some of the live music festivals. There's amazing things happening already, and I don't work for the Borough Council, I have no reason to say it, but the support from the Borough Council is huge. What I'm saying, I suppose, is that we don't want to be the best kept secret in the Northwest. And that's part of it, isn't it? It's about it comes back to that self-promotion and our reputation, because who benefits from this? Probably not us lot sat in this room. Who benefits from this are the young people coming through our doors, and that's where the talent is.
Perhaps you should change the title of the book, that all roads lead to Wigan Pier.
Yes, why not?
Have you got authority to do that, Richard?
Yes.
There's your headline, Alan.
because it's out of copyright.
Right, there we go.
There is a lot of talent in the town, nobody knows about it. But as soon as we put in our musical that Richard Blair, the son of George Orwell, was in it, we had the world and his wife wanting to interview us. As soon as Ian McKellen found out that, you know, Donna and I were teaching the rugby lads how to do ballet, we had Chilean TV interviewing us. We had all sorts of things going on. So it is about getting the message out there with a blast of something that attracts people to it. Because otherwise, as you're quite right to say, we have all this good stuff and no bugger knows about it. Especially nobody beyond the borders of, you know,
you had Lisa Nandy, you had you had Andy Burnham, and one thing I would say is, my gosh, stories are powerful, you know, and they independently come in and speak to young people. Their stories are so aspirational, and they were obviously there, and obviously Richard, you were the star of the show, so to imagine what that's like for young people to come in and hear those stories, to see that level of performance, and then to have the son of, I mean, it's huge. And as you say, no matter where you go in the world, they may not have heard of this or that, but they've heard of George Orwell.
Yeah,
of course they
I think
my,
most
my entire point.
It's quite often about timing, isn't it? I think the last 10 years has seen a sort of an uptick in terms of venues and opportunity.
Definitely.
I think the strength of the facilitation of all of that has improved. Dave's referred a number of times to the voluntary sector, which is a proper army across the borough. I mean, I don't know, and I can't compare what our voluntary sector feels like compared to other large towns, but it feels pretty strong to me, and that would always play its part. And over the next few years, we are going to see a transformation of the town centre, because it has to happen. I mean, we're sort of at the beginning now of that turnaround, and there are a number of things linked to that. And then just away from the town centre, we've got the Hay Hall project, which is not just about the sort of heritage hall, but also about the woodland areas. So there's a very different looking feel to Wigan over the next sort of 3-4 years, and it feels like it's a time to be being aspirational about what we might try and make happen, and to help put Wigan on a bigger map. I don't play to the fact that the sort of that we've got no recognition. I think we have, but it can always be better, and I think we've got a massive opportunity to move us from where we are towards where we'd like to be over the next 3-5 years.
And I think any festival that we kind of do as well needs to also start to spin off, as we mentioned before, into like neighbourhoods, because I know you and I have done a lot of work at Plattbridge, Alan, and obviously we know a lot of young people don't go out of their neighbourhoods, and how we kind of bring some of that, and like I said, opportunities as festivals to have it in the Wigan and Leigh town centres, but how it impacts in schools, and that is going to be key, because it's going to be interesting as well. I know Gary and I were at a meeting last week, and I've got an event in November that Andy Burnham is running, a Social Enterprise Summit, and they just refreshed the industrial strategy at the minute. I can't confess we've read it yet. I don't know if you've read it since last week, Gary. But I'm sure obviously culture and the role that will play in this new revised industrial strategy will be there. So that will be fascinating to see how, and I'm sure opportunities to link this kind of work festivals into that industrial strategy, because that is the thing, isn't it? It's not just about, as you've said before, it's not just about the role that it will play in terms of obviously the people who will be performing, etc., but the role it will play in safeguarding these buildings, how we use our open spaces, all that backroom support, the role it will play in terms of the economy. It's such a crucial time to kind of do it, and I know our sector, as we said before, is massively behind it. We just need that. We just need something there that brings our neighbourhoods and towns together, and what a better way than a festival.
I think actually one of the problems really was that it was already starting in the mid 2015, 16, 17, 18. And unfortunately, COVID brought everything to a skidding halt. And it lost its momentum, and is now having to try and restart.
Exactly.
But things have happened since then. Like people are now just working from home. People don't want to. They want to give up work. They want to stay at home now, which I think is a terrible shame. And we've got to start the economy rolling again to generate money, because that's the only way you'll get anything done in the end.
Absolutely, yeah. It's that whole concept of what a festival does is it generates wealth, because you can't do anything without money. That's the whole thing. Richard, whilst you're here, I am conscious of the time for everyone and one or two people, but I'm just interested to know what you think your stepfather would have thought of. Gary's mentioned he came from a mining background, and he's frequently telling me going on when I accuse him of being wealthy now, that he was born in a chip shop with rats in his bedrooms. And similarly, when I was in an up two down in Wigan, my grandfather was a miner, one of them, the other was a builder. What would he have thought now of us sat here now talking to you, his son, about doing some cultural enterprise? Would he have been pleased? Would he have been surprised?
Well, if I may just very quickly correct you, he wasn't my stepmother. He was my father. Pure and simple.
Sorry. Your father. That's it. Your
no.
Right.
What would he thought of what's happening? Well, of course, as I've said so many times, the short answer is I have absolutely no idea whatsoever. But that's no use to man nor beast. So what I look at, the way I look at it is that, first of all, my father was a patriot. If push came to shove, he would have supported England, Great Britain, in any endeavour to fight for his country. But one of the other things that's interesting is that when he was living on Jura, he wrote a lot of letters, essays, decrying the people of Scotland, and was saying that the Gaelic was a dead language, blah blah blah. Towards the end, he was changing his mind. He said if we could get the landlords off our backs, or if the Scots could get the landlords off their backs, Scotland had a lot to offer in terms of language and culture. Now you can translate that back to Wigan in many ways. So I think he was he was open to a suggestion, And I think that's one of the things about my father was that he would correct himself if he thought he was wrong. And a lot of people tend to ignore that and take his word as absolute gospel. No, he wouldn't have. Had he survived, I think he would have changed his mind about many things. But that's only my personal conjecture.
It's fascinating hearing talking about your dad. I mean, we've all, but I would, if we're really honest, I'd just like to listen to you non-stop, because it's fascinating, isn't it, to think somebody who knew him and actually can I mean, just that very fact that actually he did correct himself, and like we all do, we look back, don't we, and say things have changed. What was my, and if we evolve and enhance, and it's having that ability to reflect.
Yeah, I mean, he. The famous story, of course, was the list that he put together when he was in hospital in Cranham Sanatorium, about the people who he thought were not either communists or fellow travellers. And he wrote this list for a lady called Celia Paget. And he went through it, and he corrected himself afterwards. He thought, maybe I got this one wrong here in parts. So he was open to suggestion that, if he had survived longer, he could well have changed a lot of his mind. And people called him a misogynist. He might have mellowed in time.
Yeah.
So I'm always trying to defend him against all comers. I have to use my feet and fists, fight them off. But the other thing about it is that actually he was a great father, and he had a wonderful sense of humour. It was so dry, it was like a crisp, and it was deadpan. But I mean, I can tell you, the story of when at the age of 3, I decided to take up smoking. I use that sometimes to end a talk. Well, I suppose we've got time. He was a heavy smoker. He smoked a tobacco called Black Shag, which made Capstan Full Strength. I don't know whether remember Capstan Full Strength.
I worked in the tobacco industry for a while, which I'm ashamed of, but I did work in the tobacco industry.
He made Capstan Full Strength look like Embassy Mild.
Right.
Wow.
It was, and he smoked roll-ups, and at lunchtime he would sit with his back to the fireplace in the dining room. This is on Jura, and he would throw his dog ends into the fireplace. I found an old pipe in the garden, and I was sitting, and they were all sitting around talking, and I thought, well, he smokes, father smokes, I'll have a crack at this. So I got down after my lunch. I went down behind him, took out a cigarette, stuffed him into the pipe. Have a light, please. And my father, without a break in the conversation, passed down he had a Zippo lighter, by the way. Where he got it from, I've no idea. But he passed down his Zippo lighter round his back and gave it to me, and just carried on talking. So I thought, don't they know what I'm doing, or however one says it as a 3-year-old. So I tried lighting this pipe. Well, you can imagine what happened next, can't you? 4 things happened. 1, I turned very pale.
Green.
2, some pale green. 2, the world started to spin. 3, lunch reappeared. And 4, they all cracked up laughing at my expense. No, I've embellished it slightly, but that was, I mean, that is absolutely, that was basically what happened.
Whereas just removing it would have increased the temptation. I bet there was no temptation after that.
No, I said, well, when did you? I didn't smoke again until I got to senior school. I have to confess that I stopped smoking about 45 years ago. So I did. I smoked a pipe for a long time. I rather enjoyed it.
That was the done thing,
think,
though,
yeah.
wasn't it? I mean, my parents will completely deny they ever smoked. Well, they're fibbing, because I remember having to get under that cloud. It separated the living room. Do you remember the top half and the bottom half? And you duck, wouldn't you? And my mum says, it was a very short period. It was not a very short period.
Yeah, and the sitting room had to be redecorated.
Yeah.
Turned yellow. Fortunately, these things, I'm glad, are slowly receding into the background, but vaping seems to be a major problem.
Yeah, it certainly is.
It is, yeah. Well, you see it at the college, we see it at school.
Presumably,
The good thing is TikTok is a really quite popular platform, and there's a lot of people now who are having issues, respiratory issues, that young people are in hospital and they're sharing their stories.
Right, that's good.
And I think, and also one of the soap, I don't really watch the soaps, I know I should, maybe, I don't know, I just don't, and one of the soaps has picked it up with a, I believe, with a health
It's
issue.
a Coronation Street story, I think. Yeah.
So I think they're starting, because for a while there hasn't been that message, has there? It's been quite cool and just people wagging fingers, but now I think they're starting to realise.
Look, I think in the way that the show had its time pre-COVID in 2018, the Beyond Wigan Pier show, I think what Alan's outlined feels like it's got its time again, and I think in some respects the gap between, which will be the best part of 10 years perhaps, between 2018 and 2027, I mean that's a long time, but because of the sort of macro point of inflection which has been COVID, and I think the refresh of Wigan, let's call it that, in terms of some of the significant developments that are going on, it sort of feels like the right time again, and having a platform which truly looks to engage with communities across Wigan feels like a really good thing, and it's hard to imagine an opportunity that could sort of look and feel like that. I think it has its place.
I think there's also an appetite for it, and if I think first time around, if we're being honest, I think there was an appetite from the professionals and certain elements of the community. I think that's changed. I think there's a much broader appetite now, because they've seen actually the impact, and I think sometimes you've got to see it to understand it and to buy into it. So I think absolutely, I think it goes beyond the performers, doesn't it? It goes way beyond. I mean, I'm coming to your world. I mean, I'm thinking of the Young Carers group. I think in how inclusive we've become. There's a breadth of community groups, I think, that would absolutely we want to be part of this journey, and would feel like, and I think that's what it comes, when we come back to young people, sometimes they just want to feel like they're making a difference. They don't want to feel helpless, and to be involved in something that they can actually not only go with, but to be at the start of something powerful. And let's be honest, that's what they're hungry for.
yes, I mean, I'm privileged to go out, because I'm also patron of the Orwell Foundation, who do work with schools, the Orwell Youth
And they
Prize.
came into our college,
Yeah, and we Quentin Coppett, my cousin, and I go into schools, and we listen to these kids doing workshops, and then they do a talk afterwards. And I'm always, as an old has-been, like at my age, I used to think, oh, young kids, but they're absolutely wonderful. They really are switched on.
they are.
And it gives me great confidence that when I go, that my advice always to them is at the end of it, so, when you go out into this big bad world, for God's sake, don't screw it up any more than it already is. But going back to the Alan's work, the little bit that we saw in 2018 was brilliant, and he's now expanded it to a full opera, and that was a brilliant night. To put that on as a full blown show, I think would be wow. That would be a bit of a wow.
You would.
Yeah,
I've always just felt that, like I said before with our sector, that it just needs something, in the borough, and culture and the festival is the perfect way to really bring everybody together. Because I look at the work that we do. We have things like we have a program called Proper Good, which is like social investment, and there's about 5.5 million left in this pot, and we know we can get that out to these groups out there, whether that's venues, whether that's mental well-being groups, people supporting with disabilities, you name it. But trying to do it on their own, trying to get these groups to kind of apply, knowing that they're on their own in a way. So if there was a way in which these groups could see this opportunity where, you know, buildings and festivals and that, so it would just really kind of allow all our groups to kind of feel like actually they can, I'm not saying take a risk in terms of getting some of this investment, but it just needs something there. And I think we're slowly seeing over the years with like the Fire Within strategy, and obviously lots of stuff kind of going on. They mentioned before, but the deal, etc. And slowly now it just feels like if this was there, and then this put Wigan on the map, then these groups can then feel like every year that there's something there that they can base their business on, their plans on, etc.
But let's challenge what that offer is, because opera, you don't always think of Wigan, and actually the buy-in, that's another thing. You know, you assume where that should go, what county, what town. Well, you know, think again. Think again. And that's what the young people would say. They would say, change that narrative and think again, because actually, you know, you will be really amazed at not only how they will attend, but that what they will take from it. And they will come with their families. And absolutely, we've got to not almost decide for them.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think the other thing is, of course, the other problem, of course, is the age-old problem, money. And there's the limited pot. And there are 4 people sitting in rooms like this talking about doing the same thing as we've just done this morning, all looking to promote themselves and their town, city, call it what you will. So one has to use a kind of sharp elbows many ways, and make yourself heard with some I don't know, catchphrase, something that attracts or gets the attention of the people who are dishing out the money in order to promote it. Because I don't think if you walk around the streets with a bucket, you're going to get any response, to be honest.
Alan would.
Well, fair enough. I'm not sure that I would. But you know what I mean. It's money is the deciding factor, isn't it? We never have enough money.
I'm not convinced, though, that you and you know, you could tell me I'm wrong. I'm not convinced that you would find a town where the leaders of the town, you know, if you really look at the leaders of this town, are as passionate, genuinely passionate. It's not a tick box. Genuinely supportive and engaged in culture, where we have so many huge projects coming together at once, where there has been almost a transformational journey in terms of appetite. I think that is incredibly unique.
For Wigan?
For Wigan, oh, absolutely. And even, you know, when I first got here, I'll just tell you a very small story. Short story, I'm a Christian. And it was really bizarre because I was debating, do I go? Is this the decision for me? And you think about it. And I prayed on it really hard. And then I came to Wigan. And I came here and I was surprised how many Christians, and you know, I have multi-faith friends and very open-minded, and how many people, and then friends that arrived at the mosque, etc. We all arrived around the same time, to the point that it seemed a little bit, we were all looking at each other thinking this is really odd. And it's almost like it's happened again. You know, we've got a huge big campus opening, the town centre, the Hay Hall, and look at the leaders and the investment and the support and the new government. It's all aligning again, and there's definitely something. I don't know how to. I don't think I'm describing this in quite the right way, but there's something special happening in Wigan, and it's transformational. And I think, you know, for someone like myself who's watched it, even how inclusive the town was. I mean, when I got here, I very rarely saw anyone but a white student. And the views of some of the families were quite startling, and the arts have very much been at the forefront of changing those views and changing those perceptions. And that's all the people in this room, the leaders in this room. It's been a huge effort, and you feel it and you see it everywhere you go.
So do you think people are beginning to pick up their feet a little bit
100%.
and starting to increase the pace?
Definitely within the communities. Yeah, absolutely. And I think the history, I've never ever worked anywhere where I've met people who are so proud of where they're from. And I'm from Liverpool, so that's a statement coming from me. That's a heck of a statement as a Liverpool fan, etc. But no, if you could bottle that passion, what they've got for their own communities and their town in Lee and in Wigan, I think that's a selling point in itself. And I think now's the time to capture that.
It's interesting because I know me and my wife always have this kind of like conversation every time we go somewhere, whether it's in the Lake District or even America or places like this. We always, because my wife's from Warrington, obviously I'm from Wigan, we live in Loughton now, so we're on that border. And every time somebody says, "So where are you from then?" Whoever gets in there first, and usually that's me, to say like, "I'm from Wigan." But so many times my wife will say, getting first, "We're from Warrington," and that's it. Then it's like stone cold silence. And then when I say I'm from Wigan, it's usually, "Oh my God, Wigan Casino, or Wigan Pier, or rugby," and it always starts a conversation up. And you just kind of think, and as I keep saying to my wife, it's like, that's why I keep telling people Wigan, not only because I'm proud of Wigan, but it's the conversation piece. People have a history of Wigan at some point. No offence to Warrington, I love it to bits, but it doesn't
Well, it gets you into the conversation, though, doesn't it?
It is.
Yeah,
it is.
I think I'm not the only person who says this. I've heard other people. I've heard Chris Rodlinski say it in the last 6 months. There's definitely a Wigan thing, and when you say Wigan thing, that doesn't necessarily resonate across the borough, because there's a Lee thing as well, which is not necessarily Wigan. And I've tested this. So when I'm in London or other parts of the UK, and I ask, am I in some denial? Am I sort of making this up? And they say no, there is a Wigan thing, and it might be around pride and heritage. It's definitely about passion, and I think it does stand up really strongly against other towns and cities. Bottling it, as you've just said, is really difficult. But I think we should strive for that, because there is something about that sort of DNA which could differentiate us from others who were looking for perhaps funding.
Yeah, well, you have several items which are in your favour, in the sense that makes you stand out amongst others. And if I may say so, the road to Wigan Pier is probably one of them. I'd say Wigan Warriors is probably not far behind, actually, but in a sporting way, a slight tongue in cheek there, but sure to me. So Wigan's got a hold of something that it can build on and make itself known to the rest of the country. Certainly, you start in the northwest, which it already has, and you can take it on from there. I'm sure you could draw the other towns in. They might argue against it, but that's by the by.
I couldn't speak for other festivals. I know a little. I lived in Cheltenham for a short while. I know about the Literary Festival in Cheltenham. I've visited Edinburgh as a sort of someone who enjoys that festival. I think what we're talking about today, what's come through to me today, is that whole sort of, how do we help address inequality? And I think I know the council have more recently. I was looking there. I wasn't sure I got something with me, but Progress with Unity is the sort of headline there, and at the heart of that is two missions. One of which is very, very much about addressing inequality, and I think, interestingly, the arts and culture could be a very interesting way of sort of dealing with that, and giving opportunities for a much wider cross section of our community. And I really like Dave. Sorry, Richard. I really like Dave's sort of challenge around sort of ensuring that it's sort of neighbourhood sort of engagement and sort of building it in that way. And also Maxine's sort of point about let's not tell people what they want. Let's sort of use that network to sort of establish what it is that would really sort of capture their imagination. But I think that is a significant point of differentiation.
Well, I certainly think culture, of course, then you are then embracing all religions, cultures, ethnic minorities, majorities, whatever. Let them all come in and let them all make a contribution.
Yeah,
it's the old adage, male, pale, and stale. I think we can move on from that a little bit, can't we? For heaven's sake.
Okay, so just a great big thank you to Richard Blair, to Maxine Mealy, to Gary Speakman, and for David Baxter to taking part in this conversation. I think it's clear that we all agree that this is something that Wigan could use, that it could very much do what we want it to do, which is attract the community to a grassroots arts and culture experience, which in turn could, with a following wind, lead to a festival which could be ongoing and which could certainly improve the attractiveness of Wigan as a destination to people both outside of Wigan, within the UK, and even beyond. So thank you all. I very much look forward to seeing you again. Bye now.